balls. So when we console log balls, you'll see a node list show up. Okay, so here is our node list. I'm just going to expand that so we can see it a little bit better. And in our node list, we have the first div, second div, and third div. We also have a property of length. So node list may look like an array, but it's not, okay? Don't treat it as an array. I just want to show you this outlier example of how we can also access the length of a node list because it exists as a property. So that is just something that I want to draw your attention to. Even though length can be used on strings and arrays, there are many outliers, such as the one I showed you. I'm showing you this as it really confused me when I first started, so I thought I'd get in there quickly and just explain that JavaScript is quite flexible. We've just used length on a node list, which is not an array or a string. We are able to do this because the node list has a length property. Okay, I think I've covered length enough for us to move on. Please do pause here and please have a go at creating your own examples. Perhaps have a go at, recreating this. Have a pause here, have a go, or if not, hey, let's carry on. Next up, we have concat. The concat method is used to merge two or more things. We're going to look at arrays and strings together. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's look at a string for our first example. So I'm just going to get a string const word, and then I'm going to say cheese, and then const name Anya. So we have two words here. Now what if I want to essentially put both of these words together? So I'm just going to put say cheese Anya. So it's not essentially one word now, it's a sentence, but we are still joining two strings together. Okay, so if there's any confusion, one string and then second string. If you want, let's actually just call this string and then string 2. Just so we're super clear about what we're doing, we are joining together two strings. So now I'm going to get my console log out, and then I'm going to get the first string. I'm going to use concat. So once again, this is a JavaScript method. I am not making concat up. Let's open up our parentheses, and now I'm going to pass through string 2. So there we go. I have joined the two strings together to make one string that says say cheese Anya. So that is our example with strings. Let's have a look at how this works with arrays. With arrays is pretty similar, but I'm just going to type it out for you so you can see. Now, the important thing to know when we use this method on arrays is that this method does not change the existing arrays, but instead returns a completely new array. Okay? So just keep that in mind. I'll show you what I mean. Let's get array 1, and let's say array 1 is, I don't know, let's use integers this time. So our first array is an array of 1, 2, 3 values. And then our second array, so array 2, is going to be 4, 5, 6. So we're essentially counting to 6, but it's split in two arrays. So once again, let's get our console log out. I would get the first array, if I just spell it right, array 1. And then I would use concat, the method of concat, which I am not making up. This is a JavaScript method. And I would pass through array 2. And what does that return? Well, it returns a new array with all of our numbers in it. Okay, so I'm actually going to store this as something. Const new array. I'm just going to store it here. So you see what I mean by the fact that we are not changing any of the arrays at all. We've created a new array, because if I console log out array 1, well, you will see this array right here. If I console log out array 2, once again, you will see that array still exists. We have not mutated these in any way. And if I console log out new array, well, you guessed it. We got a new array, which uses both of these arrays. Great. So that is another thing that you might want to make note of. This method does not change the existing arrays. It returns a new array. Cool. Now, we could also concat strings with integers, strings with booleans. That is completely up to us. Concat is not gonna, discriminate against any of that, so go ahead. We can also do something like this. So let's just make a third array, array 3, 7, 8, 9. And then by passing through array 3, we are essentially joining together all 3 of the arrays. Okay, so it is quite flexible. I hope that was useful. Once again, please do have a go at writing these yourself. By building that muscle memory is the only way you'll really get to grips with learning these JavaScript methods. Okay, so I just want to talk to you about the join JavaScript method. Let's get to it. The join JavaScript method creates and returns a new string. So I'm just going to say returns a new string, because I think that's important for you guys to remember, by concatenating all of the elements in an array. Okay, so not like concat, it is going to literally take everything in an array and join it together. So for this, I've actually gone ahead and used document and query selector. I did not make these up. This is a JavaScript method that will allow us to search for the div or element with the class. So we've got a dot here, so we know we are searching for a class name of text. So essentially we are searching for this div with a class name of text. So we're going to search for any element with a class name of text. And we're going to store it as a const that I have chosen to call text display. Okay, so that is how we would get that div. And then I would grab the text display and use a JavaScript property of inner HTML. So once again, I'm not making this up, to assign whatever we want. So let's just go ahead and write test. And there we go. You will see the string text show up in my div, which is in this orange body. Okay, now let's use join on an array to try test it out. I just want to show you how you can use the join JavaScript method. And for this, I'm just going to make another array. Let's go ahead and call it emotions. So I'm going to make an emotions array. So instead of saying the word text, I just want to use emotions there. So whatever we type in here should show up in our text display. Make sure that this is at the bottom, because obviously we will read this first, and then whatever is in our emotions, we assign to the inner HTML of the text display, which is an element with a class name of text. So I'm just going to put happy. There we go, happy. Let's put sad. And let's put confident. I think that's an emotion. So at the moment, we have these 3 elements in our array. They are strings. So we've got 3 strings in our array. Now, I can use join to literally just bunch them all up together and make them appear as one word. So I could do this easily. Let's get our emotions. Once again, make sure to put it above here. Emotions, and then use join, like so. So you might not be able to tell, but if we actually console log emotions, you will see that is just one long string. Okay, that is opposed to what we were getting before. So if I just get the emotions, that is an array with 3 elements that are strings inside it. And once again, let's use join. And there we go, 1 string. So we can join up all of our strings like that. If I want to get rid of the commas, I could do that too. So there we go, by passing through an empty string, I'm essentially getting rid of the commas in between. So that is also quite cool. Essentially what I am passing through here, if I do pass through anything at all, will replace the comma. So because I pass through an empty string, a comma's been replaced by nothing. I can also replace it with that, or the number 2, or 3, or blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Okay, so by leaving an empty string, you are essentially replacing a comma with nothing to get one word that says happy, sad, confident. Okay, now I did say this returns a new string, so it won't work if I just got emotions and use join on it. Okay, that will not work. You will see that has not worked. I am not getting all 3 words as one. I would need to store this because this returns something, okay? It like gives something back, so we need to catch it and store it as something else. So const new word equals, and then I just replace this with new word. We've called it back and we have assigned it to the inner HTML. So once again, I can just put that here too. All numbers. It is up to me. So that is how I would use the JavaScript method of join. I hope you can see how it's different from concat. It is totally up to you when you would like to use each one. I think it just depends on the problem you are currently trying to solve. I hope this has helped. So I hope by showing you both, you will be able to make that choice eventually. Okay, let's move on. In this next section, I want to focus on the JavaScript method of pop. The pop JavaScript method essentially removes the last element from any array and returns that element. For this, I have already pre-made a Cinema board for us, so we can see some Cinema names in our browser, and so that I can show you the pop JavaScript method in action. Before we get going, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what is happening here. So essentially, I have made this using HTML and CSS to look like a cinema board, similar to what you would see if you're going to watch a movie at the cinema. I have then picked out this lighter red square using document query selector. So I am not making this up. Document and query selector. Query selector is a JavaScript method that will essentially look into our HTML document and look for an element with the class name. We know it's a class because of the dot of display. So let's go in here and you will see a div with a class name of display. That is styled to be like coral, so we know this is the element that we mean. So I am finding that using query selector and I'm storing it as display for us to use in our JavaScript file. Okay, so let's think of some movies. Const movies equal, and then let's open up an array because we're going to use pop on that array, and the movies I want to put in are Argo, Aliens, and Fear. So there we have our 3 movies in an array. We know it's an array because we open up these square brackets and we have 3 elements, which are 3 strings in our array, which we have stored as movies. If I console log out movies, and get our console log up, you will see we get them back here. We don't want the console log for now, so I'm just going to put it down. Okay, now let's actually get to putting the movies into our display. So I'm going to use display. So I'm literally grabbing this. So we're grabbing the light coral square. This is actually a JavaScript property. So using inner HTML, I'm going to set the inner HTML of my div to be the movies. Okay. So we can now see the movies in our browser, so it's going to be easier for us to put pop into action. Now, say I want to just remove the last movie from our list. Well, I could do this super easily. I need to do it above the inner HTML, so before we assign the movies to our display. So I'm going to do it up here. I'm going to grab my movies. I'm going to use pop, like so. And there you go. You will see I have now taken this array and essentially removed the last item from our array. Now, it is important to know that the pop method changes the length of the array, okay? We're not creating a new one. We have changed this array. At the moment, this might not mean much to you, but as soon as we start looking at other JavaScript methods for arrays, this will make a lot more sense. For now, just remember or make note in your notepad that pop changes the length of the array. It does not create a new one. We can essentially do this on whatever we like, so I'm just gonna delete that for now. So we've got all three of them back. Now say I, instead of had 3 strings, I had 3 objects. So I'm just gonna create 3 objects. There's 1 object, 2nd object, 3rd object. So you can see 1 object, 2 object, 3 object. And in my object, I have name Argo. It's the name of the movie. And then length. Let's just say, I don't know how long it is, but let's just say it's 136 minutes. Same for this one. So name Aliens. And let's say the length of the film is 201 minutes. And name Fear. And this one can be 1 to 4 minutes. So now I have an array of 3 objects, movie objects. If I console log that out, you will see my 3 objects. So let's click into the first one. There's our first object, 2nd object, 3rd object. Now, if I console log out movies, there's 3 objects. So as we can see here, I'm just going to select that and shut it down. And if I take the movies and go pop, and then I console log movies again, you will see I only have 2 objects. So once again, pop works on an array. No matter what is in the array, it can be a string, it can be an object, it could be a number. It will simply get rid of the last element in your array. So yep, as you can see, we have this object and this object. This one has been removed, so the last one has been removed thanks to pop. Great. Okay, I'm just going to delete this for now. Now I want to show you the opposite of pop, and that is shift. Let's do that in the next section. In this section, we're going to talk about the shift JavaScript method that removes the first element from an array. Let's do it now. In this section, we're going to look at the shift JavaScript method and how to use it to remove the first element from an array. Using this method, we'll remove that item and return the removed element as well. It is also important to know, so make a note of this, that this method changes the length of an array. This might not mean much to you now, but when we start looking at other JavaScript methods, this will make a lot more sense. Okay, so just remember that shift will change the length of the original array. Let's get up some movies again. So this time, let's get the movies Goodfellas, Wolf, and Jumanji. G. Now, just like we did in the lesson before, I'm going to take the display. So I'm grabbing the display, which is essentially this light coral square. So I'm grabbing it using the document and query selector. These I did not make up, and I am searching for the div with the class name, so dot for class name of display. So I'm grabbing that here and using a JavaScript property in a HTML, I'm just going to whack in my movies array. And that's a bit too long. Let's change the first one to be another film. So I'm just going to go with Clue. There we go. Now they fit. Okay, so this time I don't want to remove the last item from my array. So I don't want to move Jumanji. I want to remove Clue. I could do so. So once again, make sure to do it above here, because whatever we have above here will be put in the displays in a HTML. We'll grab the movies array and just use shift on it like this. Okay, so now you will see that Clue has been removed from our array. So that's all we can see in our display. I could also do this with numbers. So for example, I'm just gonna make another array, const count equal, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now, if I got the count and used shift on it, what do you expect would happen if I spelled shift correctly? Well, I would expect that the 1 would disappear. Let's check that out. Let's assign it to the inner HTML of our display. And there we go. So our array has been taken here, and we have taken off the first item from our array, and then we have put it in the display. We have changed the array. We have changed its length. Next up, I want to talk to you about another JavaScript method on arrays, and that is unshift. I'll see you in the next section. In this next section, we're going to be talking about unshift, the JavaScript method that adds one or more elements to the beginning of an array and returns a new array. So let's do it. Okay, so as mentioned, the unshift method adds one or more element to the beginning of an array. It is also worth noting that this will change. So this will change the arrays. It will change the original array that we are working on. This might not mean much to you now, but once you start looking at other JavaScript methods on arrays, this will make a lot more sense. We are going to be changing the original array. So once again, let's get a const up. This time, let's pretend we aren't in a movie theater, maybe a play theater. So const plays, and let's think of some plays. So I'm just going to put one for now. I'm going to put Hamilton. And then I'm going to get the display. So here we have selected the light coral square, so we can use it in our JavaScript. And I'm going to use a JavaScript property of inner HTML. And to it, I'm going to assign the place. So at the moment, we just see Hamilton. Hamilton is the only play that is playing at our theater. I want to add some more, but I want to add them to the beginning of this array. Okay, I want to add them here. I could do this with the unshift method. So for example, to do this, I would grab the plays. So I'm grabbing this original plays array. I would then use unshift. So I'm not making this up. This is a JavaScript method. And in here, I would pass through, let's pass through another play, Wicked. So now you will see that I have added another element to the beginning of my array. Okay? So that is how you would use unshift in a very basic form. I can also add more than one element to the beginning. So let's add another one. What's another play that we can add? Let's add in Cats. And there we have it. We have now added 2 new elements to the beginning of our original array. And if I was to console log out plays, well, I guess we can see here that we have 3. This is not the same as our original array. We have changed the original array. So if I console log out plays, it should show me exactly what we see up here. And that is Wicked, Cats, and Hamilton. We have 3 items in our array. Fantastic. Let's get rid of the console log. Next up, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the JavaScript method of push on arrays. I'll see you in the next lesson. In this section, I'm going to talk to you about the push JavaScript method and how it adds 1 or more elements to the end of an array. Let's do it. So, the push JavaScript method adds 1 or more elements to the end of an array and returns the new length of the array. So this is similar to the unshift method, but we are going to be adding elements to the end of an array rather than to the beginning. So once again, we are grabbing the display. So I'm essentially grabbing the div with the class name, so dot for class name of display from our HTML, and that is this coral box right here. Let's make a const. So this time, let's do actors names. Const actors. And once again, I'm just going to have a simple array of strings. So let's have Brad Pitt. Now I'm going to get my display. So I'm going to get this element here, and using a JavaScript property of inner HTML, I'm going to just assign the array of actors to it so we can see it. Okay, so at the moment we only have 1 actor being displayed in our display inner HTML. We only have 1 actor in our actors array. I want to change this array to essentially add 2 more actors to the end of it. So I will do this by grabbing the original actors array and using push. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is a JavaScript method, and by just passing through another actor's name, so let's put Rihanna, even though she's more of a singer, but she's done a few films. I have now added another actor or another element into our original array. So now we have 2 items in our original array. We have changed, so this changes the original array. Please do remember that. Please make a note of it. Just like the others, this will become more apparent when you look at other JavaScript methods that work on arrays. Okay, and just with the unshift, we can add as many elements as we want. So I'm just going to add in, I don't know, who's got a short name that we can put in here. I'm going to put Sia, even though once again, not really an actress. And let's just put Brad. And there we go. So now we have 3 actors/singers in our array. We have changed the original array. So that is how push works. I hope you can see how it's similar to unshift. I have one last one that is similar in the way these work, which works with adding or taking away items from an array. And this one will deal with if we want to, add or subtract anything from the middle of our array, because at the moment we just looked at the beginning or end. Let's have a look at the middle. This up in the next lesson. Next up, we're going to look at slice. The slice JavaScript method essentially allows us to remove certain parts of an array. Now, it is important that it does not mutate the arrays. It produces new ones. So unlike the ones previously, this will not change the original array. Okay, so it does not mutate arrays. It produces new ones. That is important. Please make note of it. This is not like pop, shift, unshift, and push. It will not change the array. It will produce a new one. So what I mean by this is this. Once again, let's make an array. So const artists, and I'm going to make an array of artists. So let's use Shakira, Snoop, and Sia. Let's also say Beyonce. And then let's put one more in, Swift, for Taylor Swift. Okay, so that is my array of artists. Now, say I just want to take out Snoop from my list, okay? Because then they'd all be women, so let's do that. Let's get the artists array. Now I'm going to use slice. And to use slice, you can pass through two things. So you can pass through a start and an end, right? So a start index and an end index. I'm going to show you what I mean by this. The start index, if I wanted to take out Snoop, would be 0, 1. So I'm just going to console log this to see what is happening here. And then I would pass through a 2. So now I have taken out just Snoop. This is what I mean that it does not mutate the array. The array here is the same. I've essentially taken out just Snoop. So now I can store just Snoop as something. So male artists. And even though there's just one now in here, I don't know why it's so female heavy, but you know, that's just the way I did it. Male artists, slice 1, 2. So now we've stored Snoop as a male artist. I'm just gonna const male artist. So now if I console log male artists, I will get Snoop. And if I console log artists, well, the array will be the same. We have not changed the array. So what happens, for example, I'm just going to clear this out so we can start again. If I wanted to remove every artist that doesn't start with the letter S, well, that would mean removing the last 2 artists. So const not S artists. Please do bear in mind that this is not how you would search for strings that start with the letter S. We are just using a static array for this example that doesn't change. Okay, we are just giving examples of how to work with slice. You would not literally search for, you know, strings starting with the letter S this way. If we, however, want to remove the last 2 items of any array, no matter what is in the array, it does not matter what is in the array, we are removing the last 2, we would do it this way. And I would do so by grabbing the artists array and then using slice. And I can actually just pass through 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Oops, 3. So now if I console log not S artists, I would get Beyonce and Swift. I don't need to pass through a end. So as we mentioned, we pass through a start and an end. I don't need to pass through an end because we just want to continue to the end of the array. So anything from index 3 onwards will get taken off and saved as not S artists. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Just for syntax purposes, the syntax for using slice would be array. So whatever array we want, the JavaScript method of slice, so I did not make this up, and we would pass through a start and an end. That's pretty much it. Make sure these are indexes, so as if you're starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. So we have our artists. Now, using what we learned, how do you think that I would put in the first 3? So I just want to display the first 3 artists in my display. Have a think about it. Well, I'm going to store them as const s artists. And then I would get the artists, I would use slice and pass through 0 and 0, 1, 2, 3, as we want to stop after the third. So here 0, 1, 2, 3. We don't want anything past that. And then I would get the display, I'd use inner HTML, so the property of inner HTML, inner HTML like that, equals, and then s artists. And there we have it. We have Shakira, Snoop, and Sia playing at our very exclusive theatre that only allows artists that start with S to play. Weird, I know. Let's actually change it to a small s just to be on the side of best practice. Next up, we have the JavaScript method of splice. So the splice JavaScript method changes the content of an array by removing or replacing existing elements and or adding new elements in its place. Okay? Don't worry if you didn't understand any of that. I'm going to show you what I mean now. Now let's make an array. I'm going to call it movies. So what kind of movies should we have? Let's have Elf, Annie, and let's have Hero 6. Okay, I'm just going to put these movies in our display. So I would do this by grabbing the display. Okay, I'm grabbing this. I'm going to use inner HTML to essentially assign the content of this array to the inner HTML of the display. So I would do so by just grabbing the array like so. And there we go. We get Elf, Annie, and Hero 6. So our array is essentially showing up in the inner HTML of our display. Now, what if I want to remove Annie? I could do so with splice. What I would do is essentially grab the movies array, use the splice method, so I'm not making this up. I'm using it on my array. And because I want to remove Annie, well, I would pass through a 1. This is because Annie is in the 0, 1 first position or index 1 in my array. So if I pass through a 1, well, you'll see that Annie and Hero have been removed. But if I pass through a 1 again, you will see that Annie is the only one being removed. Okay? So that is how splice works. I've just removed the item in the array with index number 1. I can actually also add another parameter to this. So I want to replace Annie with something else. I'm going to replace Annie with Mulan. And I can do that like so. Okay, let's try a different example, okay? Let's do something else just so you get used to using splice. So back at our normal array, that's the one we are starting with. Now, I'm going to get rid of Hero and replace it with something else. So I would do this by finding out where Hero 6 is in our array. It is the 0, 1, 2. It's the second index. So 2, that would remove Hero. So I could just essentially pass through a 2 if I wanted. And then add. But then if I try to add hook, so I'm just going to add hook, you will see that will not work. Okay, this is because we need to pass through a second parameter. This is essentially a third parameter, but we're reading it as a second. We can replace things by the third parameter. So for this to work, I would have to put in a 2, just like that. Now, what if I didn't want to replace Hero 6 with hook? I simply just wanted to add hook into my array here. So let's do that again. Well, if I wanted to add hook here, it would be in the second index. And then I just want to add hook. So I would actually just use a 0 So there we go. Obviously, it's not fitting on one line. I'm just going to delete that for it to work. I would just pass through a 0 into my splice method. This is because I want to remove 0 elements before index 2. Okay, so I'm removing 0 elements before index 2. So nothing's changing. I'm just simply inputting hook into my array. I think the best way to think about it is like this. So let spliced array equal, and then we get our array and we use splice, and then we pass through the first parameter, which is the start index. So just as we did before, if I wanted to replace Annie, I would go 0, 1. So I'd pass her a 1. That is the start index. So I'd go like that. And then our second parameter is the delete count. And it's the delete count from the start. So if I wanted to then delete Annie, I would go 0, 1, and I would delete Annie. However, if I didn't want to delete anything at all, I just wanted to input a element like we did with hook, I would put through a 0. And then after that, we would put through the item that we want to replace. So for example, hook. So once again, that is the start index that we pass through, the delete count, and then the replacement. Okay, so I'm just going to move this out of the way so you can read it. If you ever need to think about it, that is the syntax for splicing an array. Start, delete count, replacement. Okay, let's carry on. Next up, we have the for each JavaScript method. Let's do it. The for each JavaScript method executes a provided function once for every array element. What I mean by this is that if I decide to change, for example, all of these pink flowers, yellow backgrounds to red, I could do this in a single line of code. I'm going to show you how now. So first off, let's actually get the yellow circles in an array so we can work with them. I'm going to do this by grabbing them first. So let's go to document and query selector all this time. So I am not making this up. Query selector all will essentially look for any class name. So dot means class name, class of circle in our index.html document. Okay, so what we are doing is going in here and looking for any div with the class name of circle. So this one, and this one. We need to use all because we are looking for more than one. And now let's save them as something. So I'm going to go const circles because we have 3. So it makes sense to use the word circles. So now if I console log circles, you'll see a node list. So you might remember that node lists aren't particularly arrays. Okay, it's a node list, but we can treat them similarly for each. So we have our first circle, our second circle, and our third circle. Just going to get rid of that. So that is what is stored in our const circles. Okay, so this is the syntax for each. We have the array, and then we go for each, and then we open up our parenthesis, and in here, we can call this whatever we want, okay? It's just the first item of the array, so it's hypothetical. It's made up. I can call it X, and for each item or X in our array, I'm going to do something, right? So that is how it would look. I'm going to show you this with our actual array so it makes more sense. But just remember that's the syntax. So based on that syntax is what I would do. I would grab our array, or in this case, node list to be precise, and then I would use for each, open up our parentheses. Now for each item in our circles node list, or whatever array we are working with, I'm just going to call it circle instead of X. Okay. So right, so for each circle in my circles, I want to change it to red. So I would use style. Once again, I'm not making this up. Style, background, color. This is something that we did in the previous lesson. So I'm essentially adding a background color to the style of circle. We have this color right here, but I want to change it in my JavaScript by writing that. And let's just change it to red. Amazing. So we have now done that. I'm just going to minimize this for you. So once again, for each, we get an array or a node list. We can do a node list too. And we use for each. And then for each item, so I can call this glob. It really won't make a difference. It will still work. It's literally whatever we want to call it. And for every item in our circles, I change it to red. Okay, so that is one example of how to use for each. Let's go back to bases and just do it for a normal array using a console log. So if you want to write that down, actually make a note of that. That is how you would change each of these to a different color. Please feel free to have a go at this yourself. Pause here if you need to pause longer. I'm going to carry on. I'm just going to get rid of this. So let's do another example. Let's make an array. So const names equals Ania, Bob, B, and then Melanie. So that's an array of names. Now, if I was to get the names and for each name, okay, so for each name, once again, I could call this, I don't know, dog if I wanted to. It really doesn't matter. It just means for every item in our array. Let's change it back to name though, because it makes more sense than dog. And then if I just want to console log out each name individually, rather than as an array, I would do this. So let's get our console log. And there we go. We've actually done a mistake here because it's saying that this is one element. So 1, 2. Well done for anyone that spotted that. Let's actually fix that. And there we go. Ania, Bobby, Melanie. We are printing out each item of an array. So each name as we chose to call it in our console log. I'm just going to do one more example, and that's with numbers. So const numbers. Let's say we have, actually let's make it more realistic, const scores. So here we have an array of random scores. There we go. And then it turns out that the person counted the scores forgot to add 2 points to everyone at the beginning. So all of the scores in our array, no matter how long the array, I mean, it could literally be like really long. We don't know how long it goes. Let's just make it go over our vision so we can pretend that we don't know how long the array is. Using for each, I can add +2 to each of these numbers. So scores for each. So for each score, whatever we want to choose to call it, we can call it I, we can call it score. For each score, just use console log again so we can see it. I want to add 2 to each score as we print it out. So as you can see here, let's just look to the beginning. I'm going to clear that out so it's easier to read. We can also, if we want to do more things, not just have one line of code, use curly braces like this. So that would be the correct syntax with the for each. It will work the same. So you will see here that we have added 2 to each of the scores. So 32 went to 34, 5, 4, 3 went to 5, 4, 5, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay? Just format that a little bit better, and we have finished. Okay, so we've covered using for each for elements in our browser. We've covered it for strings, and we've covered it for working with integers and arrays too. The for each method is very powerful. It is considered to be a loop, just like the for loop, so it's very similar to that. It's just your preference as to when you'd like to use each one and if it's more suitable for a certain problem. Let's carry on. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the JavaScript method of sum. For this lesson, I'm going to start off with some simple examples of sum first, and then end with a more complicated example just to show you the difference between a basic example and how you might use sum in an actual real-life project. So let's get to the basic examples first. The sum JavaScript method tests whether at least one element in an array passes the test implemented by a provided function. So what I mean by this is, let's get an array and let's call it scores. And our score is going to be 23, 56, 76, and 59 out of 100. Now, I want to check whether some scores are above 50, okay? And if some scores are about 50, well then, let's just say we passed the test. Okay, so these are our overall scores for the year. If at least one of them is 50 or above 50, I pass. That's the sort of score I go to. So let's do it now. I'm going to essentially console log it out so we can see. I'm going to get these scores. So scores, my array of scores. I'm going to use the JavaScript method of sum. So I have not made this up. This exists as a JavaScript method. And for each score, if that score is bigger than 50, okay, well, we get a true. This is because two of our scores are bigger than 50. So now if I change this to be lower than 50, we get a false. This is because none of the scores are above 50. So scores some of the scores above 50, no, false. That's how we would read that line. Okay, so that is a very basic example of how we would use sum. So just remember, with sum, we are checking if any of the elements in our array meet a certain rule. And if any, even just one, meet that rule, we get the Boolean of true. Otherwise, we get a false. Let's try it again. So I'm gonna write something else just so you get a better understanding of sum. Const countries. Let's get some countries up. So Afghanistan, Poland, South America. Okay, so we have an array of 3 countries. Now countries, sum, country. So once again, this is very similar to for each. This is the syntax. So I can call this whatever I want. I can call this glob and I could call this glob. Essentially, it doesn't matter. We are just giving this a value so we can check for each item in our array. And if glob, an arrow function for this as well. So if glob, so for each glob or country, let's actually change it back, country. And if each country, so we check each country, and if any of the country deeply equal Poland, then we want this to return true. So we're just finding out if Poland exists on our array. So console log that, and we indeed do get a true. So that is how sum works with strings, for example. So we are getting the array, then we use sum to check if some of the elements in our array match our rule. And if some do, even one, then we return a true. However, let's put another country that is not in our array. Russia, then we get a false because Russia is not in our country's array. Great. So that is how SUM works with a basic example. I'm now going to show you a more complicated example to show you how you might use SUM in an actual real life project. Don't worry if this is a bit too much for you. I just want to show you in case it comes up. I do use this example in my Tetris tutorial, so if you want to have a go at that, please do make a note of this. It will definitely help you understand what I'm doing in that walkthrough. Okay, so here we have, I'm just going to clear this up for us. Here we have 3 hearts. I have a hole in one of the hearts. So if you see here, I have one div that has a heart, but it also has a child div in it that has a class of hole, which is this black thing right here, and then another heart and another heart. So what I have done is essentially in my JavaScript picked out each div with a class of heart. So if I console log out hearts, because we took them all, we searched for them in our document, we searched for them by class name and the word heart, so the class of heart. We use query selector all and document to do this. Once again, I did not make these up. This is a JavaScript method. And if I console log hearts, I get a node list of the 3 hearts. The first one, of course, having a child div inside. Now, unlike before, I'm actually going to create an array out of this. So I can use another JavaScript method called array_from, which will essentially make an array of the divs for me. So now it's gone from being a node list to an array. See, one HTML div element, another. We have an array, ladies and gentlemen. Great. So that is what I get back when I console log hearts. So now if I get my hearts array, I want to write something that says if there is a hole in any of my hearts, I am heartbroken. So hearts SUM, I'm going to store this as const is heartbroken equals heart SUM, and then for each heart, so I am checking in my array of div elements for each heart, for each div with a class of heart, I'm checking if that div has child nodes. So there's another thing that I'm not making up. It is a JavaScript method that's going to help us check if the heart has any child nodes. So now if I console log is heartbroken, I get true. This is because there is indeed a hole in one of my hearts. Or precisely, if I was to talk about this in programming languages, one of my hearts does have a child element inside it, okay? So that is how I would do it. If I was to then get rid of this hole, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that here. Go back here, and once again delete that and console log is heartbroken. I get false. This is because I now don't have any child nodes in any of my hearts. So that is just one example of a slightly more complicated way that you could use SUM, or the JavaScript method of SUM. Great. I hope that made sense. Please do write this down and have a go at this if you want. Once again, it is simply just checking if any of my heart divs have a child div. I could even just have it blank and it will pick it up, as that is technically a child to the parent div. But you know, because we want to see it, I'm just going to give it a class of hole, which I previously made here. Okay, it's just a simple black hole. And there we go. Okay, I hope that made sense. I hope you've learned a little bit more about SUM. We will be using this in projects to really build your muscle memory, so don't worry if you didn't get it so much this time. Hopefully it should be a lot clearer by the end of this course. Now, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the map JavaScript method. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about the map JavaScript method is that it is